Japanese knotweed, is it worth touching properties where they have this poisonous plant in the back that grows wildly and damages foundations and all that kind of stuff? Is it really as bad as it sounds? Should you be avoiding it, or should you be buying these properties and getting a decent discount? That's what we're going to talk about today. My name is Mark Ashworth.
I'm Neil Harding.
And welcome to Property Inside. So, Japanese knotweed, what is it?
It's an invasive plant that was not indigenous to the country, came in from, I'm going to say Japan, and it's one of a number of knotweeds, isn't it? I mean, I think there are several knotweeds, but Japanese knotweed is one of the most famous ones and one that most people have heard about. But the point is, it's a very fast-growing, damaging plant that, if it's growing too close to the foundations of a property, can undermine those foundations and cause structural damage to a property, and therein lies the problem.
Yep, exactly. I think the importance is, when you're looking at a property with Japanese knotweed, is trying to determine where exactly it's growing, where its roots are, and how close it is to the property. So a few years ago, I did a property project. It was actually a flip project with a colleague of mine, and we did it together, and the property had Japanese knotweed, and fortunately we were able to secure the property at a very good price. We did some due diligence beforehand to determine how mortgageable the property was going to be once we had some eradication on the knotweed. And the important thing was that it was suitably far enough away from the actual building itself, so it was at the back of the garden. So actually relatively easy to eradicate, and to get a process in place for them to come and treat the area, and it was then not going to really affect the property mortgageability. When you sell a house, you have what's called a law, there's a legal document that you have to fill in to do with the details about the property and what you're including and what you're not including. And in that questionnaire, there's always the question about the knotweed. So it is an important thing, and it does come up, and you do legally have to tell people that you've got the knotweed if you have. So it's not something that you can get away with. It needs to be quite clear, and it also needs to have an eradication plan in place.
Yeah, so the eradication plan, that seems to me to be really key, isn't it? Because properties that have Japanese knotweed, they are mortgageable, right, if you've applied for the right product.
Yeah.
But typically, my understanding is, and I've never purchased a property with Japanese knotweed actually, but typically my understanding is, so long as you've got a lender that's aware of it, you're aware of it, there's an eradication plan in place, and you've applied for the right product that's suitable, you can get a mortgage for a property.
Yeah, there should be no problem. I mean, obviously, with all these things, it depends on each individual case. In particular, how close the knotweed is to the building, and has it already done any damage is a big one. If it hasn't already done damage, but it is in the property and it's in a treatable area, then your eradication specialist will inform you about that. And then what they do is you have an agreement which is done over a period of time, typically 18 months to 2 years, and they will come and treat the area a number of times. So it could be 3 or 4 times. I'm not entirely certain of the detail of the eradication process, but obviously, clearly, if it's going to take a 2-year process to get it done, you can't always necessarily wait 2 years before you sell the property. But as long as the plan is in place and it's been paid for, and you get a certificate from the people that are going to do it, and you can prove that to the lender, then it is acceptable for mortgage purposes.
Do you think that Japanese knotweed actually represents an opportunity for investors? Because you can negotiate discounts. A lot of investors might be scared off by it and
I think it's one of those things where, I mean, obviously these days with so much information available online, it's pretty easy to do a Google search on Japanese knotweed and actually find out quite a bit about it. And actually, it's probably not quite as bad as people seem to think it is. Obviously, a few years ago, or quite a few years ago, before that opportunity arose, you kind of like, nobody really knows what it is, and it just scares people off essentially. But I would definitely say that it would scare owner-occupiers and people who aren't experienced in property off. So I think just from that perspective, if you're a first-time buyer and you're going to a first-time buyer type mortgage lender, then the chances of you actually, anybody wanting to get involved with that, I think is fairly few and far between. So, and also the other thing to bear in mind is that when somebody comes to look at the property, if you've bought one of these properties and you've done it up and you've got the plan in place, You need to be totally and utterly upfront about that with anyone that comes to view the property beforehand. Give them the certification, give them the documents that say that the eradication plan is in place, and make sure that they're using a broker who can use lenders who are familiar with that process. Because the last thing you want to do is to have someone that offers on the property, they agree the offer, and then they take it to a mortgage lender that has no experience in it, because the chances are they might just say, oh, we can't get a mortgage on this, and they don't want to know. So it is important to, communication is the key, as with a lot of things, you know, trying to explain stuff that's important and that's a little bit unusual. So as long as you make sure that you do that up front, that's really advisable, to make sure that you communicate that well with the agent, to make sure the agent's on side, and then obviously through the vendor, through the buyer, and also through their broker as well, to make sure that you've communicated that. We had a couple of issues with trying to get that communication across. We did try very hard to make sure that it was communicated, but there was a number of calls and emails that had to go backwards and forwards just to make sure and to get it tied up in the end.
For people watching who have either viewed properties in the past and thought maybe that's Japanese knotweed, maybe it is, I'm not sure, I don't really know, I'm not a botanist, I've got no idea what a plant looks like unless it's a daisy, right? How would they know? I mean, what sort of, are there apps available? Is there technology that can help them? How would someone recognise on a viewing Japanese knotweed?
That is a great question, and I'm sure that properties are bought and sold with Japanese knotweed that no one's really noticed, although it is very fast growing and it is quite invasive, so you would think by nature of that it would be fairly obvious. Yeah, I think there are apps now that you can take a photo of a leaf and then it will send that photo using AI or Google Images or whatever it does, and then it whizzes off to Google and finds out and gives you a representation of what that plant is. Obviously, naturally you want to do that. However, if there was 100 different types of leaves in the back garden, which one would you photograph to find out? I'm not quite sure, but I think you could certainly find out online what it looks like and familiarise yourself with it. Other than that, that's about as much as I can say on it.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, hope you found that insightful and lots of good knowledge there about Japanese knotweed. Good to hear your history there on that. So yeah, if you found that video useful and valuable, please do comment, like and subscribe. It really helps us promote the channel and helps us to deliver more and more content for you, and look forward to seeing you next time.